The Biden-Harris administration is suing the state of Alabama for removing non-citizens from its voter rolls. On August 13th, Alabama's Secretary of State announced a campaign to, quote, remove non-citizens registered to vote in the state. The DOJ has now said that Alabama has no right to do that. No surprise there. Democrats have long fought to protect voter rolls padded with people who should not be there. What is surprising, though, is the argument that the DOJ is making to keep the people on the voter rolls. Usually, Democrats argue that efforts to restrict the voter rolls to eligible voters only are wrong because they will also kick people who should vote off the rolls, or that those measures will make it unnecessarily difficult for eligible voters to vote. So the argument they usually make is not that the non-citizens, the ineligible people should vote. It's that, well, we don't want to pass these measures that could inadvertently keep eligible voters from voting. That's usually how they phrase it. In this case, however, the DOJ is basically admitting that the people who would be affected are non-citizens who have no right to vote. The Alabama effort here would only affect 3,251 registered Alabama voters who had been, quote, issued non-citizen identification numbers by the Department of Homeland Security. We are talking about a relatively small number of voters identified by the federal government as ineligible to vote, and still that same federal government is suing to keep them on the voter rolls. And the only argument they're making is that Alabama waited a little too long to remove them. They should have done it 90 days out, but instead they waited 86 days out. Now, of course, Alabama is a solidly Republican state, and 3,000 voters won't affect the election, certainly not there. So what's going on? What's going on is the Biden-Harris DOJ is sending a message that it will not tolerate even the most common sense attempts to prevent non-citizens from voting. Because non-citizen voting, first, the importation of millions of foreigners into the country, then the registering of those foreigners to vote, then the prohibition on removing them from the voter rolls, that is the Democrats' long-term election strategy. You don't need to believe me. You don't need to hear from crazy conspiracy theorists. The DOJ is admitting it itself. Thus far, sorry to report, that strategy appears to be working. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. Welcome back to the show. You know, we hear a lot about banned books in the lead up to this election. Well, I've got a story. I broke it on X on Friday about some of the books that the conservatives want to ban and that the schools are pushing. Books that you should probably check out before you let your kid read them or even go to those schools. We'll get to that in one moment. First, though, I want to tell you about Birch Gold. Text Knowles to 989898. Let's talk about something that probably keeps you up at night. Your hard-earned money. With Kamala Harris proposing massive tax hikes, you might be thinking it's time to take more of your savings and make it tax-sheltered and inflation-sheltered. This is where I trust Birch Gold Group to help you. They will assist you in converting your retirement account into physical gold. And get this, you don't pay a penny out of pocket for the conversion. Here is what you need to do. Just text the word Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, to 989898. Get a free info kit on gold. That is K-N-O-W-L-E-S to 989898. Wait, there's more. This is the final day for you to take home your very own limited edition, highly coveted, one-of-a-kind, 24-karat gold-plated Truth Bomb on qualifying purchases. Yes, you heard that right. A golden Truth Bomb. Right now, text Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, to 989898 to claim your eligibility before the day ends. In a time of high taxes and high inflation, protect your savings with gold from Birch Gold. Text Knowles to the number 989898 for your free info kit today. Lots of crazy stuff going on that could possibly affect the election. Every time we say, okay, that's it, that's the last inflection point, now nothing can change between now and the election, something happens. They said this when Biden debated Trump. Okay, that's the last chance we have to really shake things up before the election. Then They tried it after the assassination attempt, the very near assassination of Trump. Oh, that's it. That's the last inflection point. Then what? Democrats, swapped out their candidate for one. Then there was another assassination attempt on Trump. Then there was the escalation of the war in the Middle East could really change things for Democrats. Then there was this awful, horrific hurricane that absolutely devastated North Carolina and parts of Tennessee over the weekend. We still don't even really have a lot of news out of there because the roads have been shut down, so everyone's praying for them. That's a major potential turning point. Beyond the human tragedy, it's a major turning point just for national politics. And now we have another possible wrinkle. That is, the Longshoremen might strike. This is a story you probably haven't read very much about. This could swing the whole election. There is a strike potentially on the horizon that could shut down as many as 36 ports in the United States that handle nearly half the cargo going in and out of the United States. This has been brewing for some time now, but it could finally boil over. Half the ports in the United States could shut down. This would dramatically affect the economy. If the work stoppage goes on for more than a month, this would cause a major shortage of consumer products. This would almost certainly affect Christmas shopping. For every single day of a port strike, experts say it could take 4 to 6 days to recover. So if this thing goes on for 1 week, this is going to create major problems. This would be the first national work stoppage by this union since 1977. All these little things, if all of a sudden the economy really starts to falter, if people can't get the goods and services they need, there's a very good chance they're going to blame the incumbent administration, which is why it's another one of these weird situations where a strike by the longshoremen, the longshoremen don't get what they're asking for, that would be bad for the country. It'd be bad for me personally because it would be bad for Mayflower cigars, which I need to import into the U.S. ports. It would be bad for Joe Biden, which means it would probably be bad for Kamala Harris, which means it would probably be good for Trump, which means it would probably be good for America in the long run because it would show what the mainstream media don't want to show, which is just how bad the economy is, just how bad the government has become under Biden and Harris, which would get enough people to vote for Trump that he could get through the election. Then we'd have a good economy. One of these very strange situations. I mentioned this about the war in Israel, the Israel-Gaza war. As it escalates, that's basically bad for America because we are then more likely to get drawn into war. But that's also bad for Biden, which means it's bad for Kamala, which means it's good for Trump, which means it's good for America, and it's good for world peace. So it's this very strange, paradoxical situation. And on that front, there's probably the biggest news out of the war in the Middle East in months, which is that on Friday, Israel assassinated the head of Hezbollah. So Israel already took out the head of Hamas, the organization that runs Gaza. Now they took out the head of Hezbollah, which is the terrorist organization, not to Israel's west, but to Israel's north. They took him out in a bunker buster bomb. This is after they blew up the walkie-talkies held by the Hezbollah members. That's after they blew up the pagers that were being held by Hezbollah members, which didn't succeed in killing many people in Hezbollah, but it did seriously demoralize them. If you just think about where you hold a pager, where you keep that usually in your pocket, on your waist, on your belt, real way to demoralize a terror group. This, again, terrible for Kamala. Anytime Israel is in the news, this is bad for Kamala because Israel's a wedge issue for the Democrats. The activist base hates Israel. The young voters really hate Israel. The older voters and the more establishment donor class broadly likes Israel. So it's just an issue. Anytime Israel comes up into the news, anytime the Biden-Harris administration is responsible for responding or not responding or really just being at the wheel while Israel goes in and wages this war, that's going to be bad news for the Democrats, which is good for America. People are having a hard time making sense of this war in the Middle East. I think I'm going to give a speech on this. I'm supposed to speak at UC Berkeley on October 7th, which is the anniversary of the Hamas terror attack in Israel, which then kicks off this big war that has led to all these campus protests. October 7th is also the Feast of Our Lady of Victory, Our Lady of the Holy Rosary, which is the anniversary of the Battle of Lepanto, one of the most important battles in the history of civilization, when Muslim Turks should have destroyed the European forces in the Holy League. If you just look at the numbers of the actual military forces, it's inexplicable that the Holy League and the Christian West would have won, but we did, and that victory is attributed to the intercession of Our Lady, and which is why the Feast of the Holy Rosary was instituted. This, of course, followed the Battle of Tours, which was the first time that the Muslims very nearly conquered all of Europe in 732, 150 miles outside of Paris. These battles have been going on for a long time, and so I think people really misunderstand what these holy wars in these in the Holy Land especially are about. So I think I might give a speech about the Crusades, which were a defensive war and were extraordinarily justified, and without an understanding of which, you can't really understand this war in the Middle East, which to me seems ultimately to come down to, from the perspective of a Christian, who's better to administer the Holy Land? Muslims, Arabs, maybe Turks, especially Turks, who were the enemy combatant in the Crusades, or the state of Israel? That doesn't seem to me to be a very difficult question. But we will get into all of that in maybe at UC Berkeley. We'll see how it goes. It seems like a good opportunity, at the very least, to discuss Holy War and why people don't really understand Holy War anymore. They don't understand Islam. They don't understand Christianity. And that's why they misunderstand the Israel-Gaza conflict. Now, speaking of Holy War, something phenomenal happened yesterday. It was a post on social media by President Trump. I am downright elated by this post. I'm still thinking about it with joy, even this morning. Trump posted a picture, one of my favorite paintings. It's the Guido Reni painting from the 17th century of St. Michael the Archangel. My patron, of course. I'm named Michael. I have this exact painting somewhere on this set, though it's a little bit hidden, so you got to try to figure out where. But it's in my show every single day. And Donald Trump tweeted out the St. Michael prayer. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. That's all he posted. Robert Reich, who was the labor secretary under Bill Clinton, he's a huge lib. Well, not huge. He's physically, he's got a form of dwarfism or something. So sometimes people, point that out about him. But he's a huge political figure. He's been a big figure in politics for a long time. He exemplified the left-wing reaction to Trump posting this prayer. He says, Trump increasingly suggests that he is God's chosen instrument of wrath, and that his opponents are evil spirits to be cast into hell. If you don't find this terrifying, you're not paying attention. This is because Trump posted the St. Michael prayer on the Feast of St. Michael. The Feast of St. Michael, also known as Michaelmas, has been celebrated by Christians for about 1,500 years. Veneration of St. Michael has gone on much, basically for the whole history of the church. But even the celebration of a feast to St. Michael has been going on for about 1,500 years. It is celebrated by all sorts of Christians, Catholics notably, but also the Eastern Orthodox, also many Protestants, Anglicans, and Lutherans notably. This is pretty mainstream, pretty widespread, and it goes back a very, very long time. This prayer that Donald Trump posted was a prayer composed, I believe, in 1886 by Pope Leo XIII, one of the great popes, recent popes. You'd say recent popes because the church goes back a long time. He composed it after he had a mystical vision of a conversation between God and Satan, in which Satan said that he would attempt to destroy the church over the next 100 years, and God was going to give him in his permissive will the opportunity to do that, to prove that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church and the church will endure. This also, the 1880s, is this time when communism is really beginning to spread. And Pope Leo XIII took a very hard line against communism. This prayer was recited after every low mass in the world from 1886 until about 1964. This has obviously spiritual import, but it was also specifically to oppose the scourge of communism, which is a demonic ideology that was spreading at that time, and which took as its chief enemy God and the church. So Trump posts this prayer, and my friend Seamus Coughlin over at Freedom Tunes pointed this out. He posts this prayer, which was composed specifically to threaten demons and pray for God's help and St. Michael's intercessory help to oppose demons and the devil. And then all these libs got really scared about it. They said, oh no, hold on, wait. Hold on, you've got this prayer that's supposed to punish demons? Get that out of here. We can't tolerate that. Shows you just, first of all, shows you how wicked the left has become. Although I guess the left has been wicked forever. Going back to the French Revolution when they were, beheading kings and queens and, opposing order and civilization and the church. But also, Robert Reich's and the left's reaction to this broadly shows you that religious and historical ignorance among our elite class in America has reached record highs. I'm not saying I expect all of these people to be Christian. I'm not saying I expect all of these people to be moral or virtuous or anything like that. I do expect them to know really basic stuff. I do expect them to know really basic historical aspects of the faith that has defined our whole civilization. I do expect them to have basic biblical and religious history. I do expect them to at least Google stuff, before they react to it. And they can't. They don't do that. The blithe ignorance of our elite class is troubling, even beyond the questions of good and evil, even beyond the religious implications of their manifest ignorance. Now, you don't want to be ignorant when it comes to, certain religious questions, final things like death, judgment, heaven, and hell. That's why you ought to check out Policy Genius. Go to policygenius.com/Knowles. Election season is in full swing, and the future is on all of our minds. It's time when we're thinking about what lies ahead, not just for the country, but for our families too. Did you know that 41% of people don't have the life insurance coverage they need? As a father myself, I understand how important it is to ensure our loved ones are protected no matter what life throws our way. That is where Policy Genius comes in. They help you find the right life insurance policy at the best price. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. They combine cutting-edge digital tools with the expertise of real licensed agents. You can compare quotes from top insurers side by side, completely free and with no hidden fees. Their support team is there to answer questions, handle paperwork, and advocate for you throughout the whole process. Even if you have life insurance through your job, it might not cover all your family's needs or follow you if you change employers. That is why it is worth looking into additional coverage. Policy Genius is not just another online service. They are the country's leading online insurance marketplace, trusted by thousands of satisfied customers. Just check out their 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. Save time and money on providing a financial safety net for your family. Go to policygenius.com/Knowles or click the link in the description. Get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. policygenius.com/Knowles. Now, speaking of ignorance, there is an official in the state of Oklahoma who is trying to reverse some of the ignorance that has set in the last 70 years of education. That would be the schools chief in Oklahoma, who is making sure that there will be a Bible placed in every single school in the state of Oklahoma to combat the woke, leftist, dumb curricula that are in those schools today. We will be chatting with that Oklahoma schools chief a little bit later on in the show, so stay tuned for that. First, though, on the question of free speech, which is certainly up for debate everywhere, but including in these curricula fights. The left just thought that it got a real hit on Elon Musk. The left just posted this article, it's in The Bite, about how Twitter bans are up under the supposed free speech absolutist, Elon Musk. And this article was going viral. It was listed on Drudge Report. Twitter, under free speech absolutist Elon Musk, is actually suspending way more people than before. This is not the gotcha that they think it is. They think it is. They think it's proof of Elon's hypocrisy. I think it's actually proof that Elon Musk understands free speech a lot better, certainly than the woke libs, but also better than the self-styled free speech absolutists. I won't read the whole article. It's worth checking out. It says, How frequently Twitter cooperates with government requests under Musk's stewardship is perhaps what contradicts this free speech vision the most. As the Washington Post noted, the site complied with 71% of the thousands of legal requests it received to take down posts on its platform in the first half of this year. The highest it had been before that was just over 50% in 2021, with most pre-Musk years falling even lower. So you're saying government requests to take down posts on Twitter have been accepted. Elon's been playing ball with the federal government, more so even than his predecessors. But notice it doesn't say which requests, because in the pre-Elon days, the federal government requests Twitter to censor, for instance, the Hunter Biden laptop story that single-handedly could have thrown the 2020 election to Trump rather than Biden, according to exit polls after that election. Pre-Elon Twitter complied with those requests, didn't comply with some other requests. Elon's Twitter does not censor stories that are harmful to Democrats, does not censor stories that are helpful to Trump. So I don't know, maybe Elon's Twitter is taking more requests to remove, I don't know, things like or threats or other crime. Sure. But the politically relevant stories, Musk is not complying with those requests, manifestly. That's a substantive difference. The article goes on. The most high-profile instance came from Brazil, after a high court judge threatened to block Twitter in its borders if the site didn't ban several accounts that were deemed to be spreading misinformation. Musk initially resisted, clinging to his free speech values, but eventually gave in to the demands. See, Twitter decided to play ball in Brazil so that the company wouldn't be banned in Brazil. See, Musk is a huge hypocrite. Any big social media site will require some moderation, but Musk's track record has shown that he doesn't apply his rules equally. Here we go. In addition to personally reinstating the accounts of people he liked, often prominent right-wingers, including Donald Trump, he has also banned journalists that were vocal critics of him and his allies. Elon Musk doesn't treat good, truthful accounts that are conducive to political flourishing the same as he treats bad, lying accounts that are, in any case, harmful to political flourishing. What a hypocrite. You hear this from the left sometimes when they disingenuously say, you promote good things, but you suppress bad things. What a hypocrite. No, it's not hypocritical to treat different things differently. And then finally, the article concludes. Just this week, the platform suspended the account of a journalist for sharing a link to a hacked dossier on J.D. Vance, Trump's pick for VP. Musk has endorsed Trump and is reportedly bankrolling his campaign. This is the way. This is the way, folks. Two big charges in this article. Elon plays ball with the government sometimes, and Elon is softer on conservatives than he is on radical leftists. Both of those things are very good. The social media platforms exist within a political order. So they have to play ball with the government. If they don't play ball with the government, they're going to end up like Telegram, and Elon's going to get arrested in Paris or something like that. They're going to end up like these other social media networks that are targets of all sorts of different governments because they're not really within the political order of any government. Twitter does not exist outside of the political order. It's part of the political order. It's part of the public square in that it exists within nations, within certain polities. And furthermore, good and bad are not the same, and we can't be neutral about those things. And we can't just have total, absolute free speech because that's never existed anywhere, and it can't exist anywhere because people have standards and norms and taboos, which is the subject of my book, Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds. Thank you. Every platform, every society, every association is going to have certain standards and norms that it enforces. The question is, what kind of standards and norms? Currently, all of the public square, basically, is rigged in favor of radical leftism against conservatism. Elon is saying, no, we're going to privilege normal stuff over radical, harmful leftist stuff. That is good. That is the way. You want to protect free speech, whatever we mean by free speech, follow what Elon's doing. It is great. Speaking of good stuff, you ought to check out Preborn. Go to preborn.com/Knowles. Every year, over 800,000 innocent lives are lost to abortion in America. By the way, that's an outdated number. That was a number about 2 years ago. Today, because of the advent of the abortion pill, it's over 1 million. Over 1 million babies a year. This is a tragedy that should weigh heavily on every American's conscience. But instead of addressing this crisis, the Biden-Harris administration is actively working against those trying to protect the unborn. They are threatening up to 10 years in jail for people defending the defenseless. And as if that weren't chilling enough, we're now seeing Democrat leaders like VP nominee Tim Walz support infanticide, killing the baby after the baby is born. This is the America we're living in, folks, but in the face of moral crisis, there's hope. Here is how $28 can make a real measurable difference for life. Preborn, an organization fighting on the front lines of the pro-life movement to protect and support mothers facing unplanned pregnancies, uses $28 to provide a life-saving ultrasound to a mother considering abortion. When a mother sees her baby through an ultrasound, the chances of her choosing life double. Preborn can't do it without our help. Right now, go to preborn.com/Knowles for $28, less than the cost of a night out. These days, less than the cost of a cup of coffee, depending on where you go. You could potentially save a life. Your tax-deductible donation goes directly for defending the most vulnerable among us. That is preborn.com/Knowles. You can also dial pound 250, say keyword baby. Support Preborn today. This is an organization that I support personally. You should support it too. Preborn.com/Knowles. Speaking of African Americans, Elon Musk, he's probably the most famous African American in the world. There is an article by the Washington Post, a little study that is making the rounds because of its apparent racial implications. The Washington Post did a survey of the most left-leaning names and the most right-leaning names in politics. We're talking about names today. We're talking about Michael Miss. My name is Michael, after St. Michael. Most left-leaning names by age. And it breaks it down, women and men, and then by age. 24 and under, 25 to 35, 35 to 45, and so on. Most left-leaning names. Just guess. Get some guesses in your mind. Imani, Nia, Ashanti, Fatima, Ayana, Imani, Nia, Shaniqua, Tamika, Said, Latoya, Lashonda, Latoya, Tamika, Lashonda, Lakeisha, Latanya, Althea. Okay. You get the point. Well, I'll even refrain from making the point until you hear. These are the men's names. Malik, Jalen, Darius, Jermaine, Javon, DeAndre, Shaquille, Jamal, Demetrius, Jamel, Jermaine, MD, I guess that's short for Muhammad, Jermaine, Demetrius, Darnell, Abdul, Muhammad, Darnell, Cedric. Okay. Just, you got a picture. You got a picture in your mind of what people with those names look like. Now, the most right-leaning names by age. Women then men. Gracie, Reagan, Ashlyn, Allie, Bailey, Ashton, Carly, Kylie, Lacey, Bobby, Mandy, Rebecca, Darla, Svetlana, Christy, Ginger, Dixie. Okay. And then men. Brock, Colton, Dalton, Lane, Brock, Braden, Heath, Clint, Tanner, Cody, Scotty, Clint, Heath, Chad, Ty. Okay, you get. Close your eyes. Do those names suggest any pictures to you? Do they? No. In our politically correct age, we're not allowed to admit that you close your eyes and you think, what does someone whose name is Shaniqua or Lakeisha look a little different than someone whose name is Ginger or Chad or something like that? So, of course, people who are not acquiescing to political correctness are coming out and they're saying, okay, well, hold on. All the left-leaning names are black people names and all the white-leaning names are white people names. And it's not even ambiguous. It's the most left-leaning names are the most characteristically black people names, and all of the most right-leaning names are like the whitest names you ever heard in your entire life. So I think some people are concluding from this that we just have this permanent racial divide on politics. And of course, black people overwhelmingly vote for Democrats, 90% plus, and white people are certainly more split, but black people, it's very clear, they vote for Democrats. So is that it? It's just this permanent racial divide. That's all there is to it. That's certainly what Democrats are thinking. That's why Democrats are importing people into the country who come from the ethnic and racial groups that they think are going to give them a permanent electoral majority. I think it's a little more complicated than that, though. Because while the superficial read on this is that there's just some permanent racial divide. First of all, black people have been Republicans for a significant portion of American history, and it's complicated how the parties have developed. But first of all, think beyond just the racial caricature and the stereotype. Think specifically of the name. we say, okay, all the most left-leaning names are names associated with black people. But I notice on that list of the most left-leaning names, there are not a lot of Clarences or Bens or Thomases or Byrons, or they're not. Those are all names associated with very famous black people. Clarence Thomas, Ben Carson, Thomas Sowell, Byron Donalds. The list goes on and on. But you don't see those names. Not a lot of Clarences, not a lot of Bens, not a lot of Thomases. So what is that? Well, a lot of these names, by the way, a lot of the names that are really associated as a matter of caricature with black people are of relatively recent vintage. A lot of them come out of the Black Power movement. A lot of them come out of the various forms of Islam that took hold in American black communities in the 1970s. The names themselves are I'm not saying they have nothing to do with racial identity and culture, but they are reflections of an ideological orientation and culture, that the name is where it is. It's not that it goes down to the DNA or something. It's that there's something about a name that is actually even deeper and more significant than race or geography or location or something like that. One thing that conservatives ought to do is recognize we're probably not going to win over people named like Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad the Fourth. That's going to be tough because that implies certain ideological predispositions. But there's no reason that Republicans can't win over black people and Hispanic people. And there's no necessary reason. But the people we're going to win over, I think, are going to be less predictable based on race than they are based on things like religion, based on things like education, based on things like habituation and culture. And it's going to be people named Clarence and Byron and Ben and Thomas. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be, there's a lot to a name. And we have to be much more careful about that. This is, of course, why the left spends so much time trying to control language, because if they can control the language, they believe they control the whole political order. Now, speaking of inducements to the right or to the left, Newsweek. This is my favorite political article that's come out in months, if not years. Newsweek has a hot scoop. Pull over your car if you're driving. Please sit down if you're standing up. How hot girls became the right's new obsession. Stop the presses. These crazy right-wingers are attracted. They like beautiful women. And it opens up. It all began with Sydney Sweeney's cleavage. And it talks about how, people on the right sort of like that Sydney Sweeney. I think we've reached peak. It's been building for a long time, certainly since the 1960s, probably since the 1760s. But we've now reached the point where left-wingers are scratching their heads, drooling and befuddled, because conservatives like beautiful women. It is good. For those who are confused, for the Newsweek editors, it is good to have an affinity for beautiful women. More broadly, it is good to have an affinity for beautiful things and persons and creatures and ideas in general. That's good. It's good to be attracted to beautiful things, and it is good to be repelled by ugly things. Now, we don't want to be superficial about that. Certain people can, be a little more homely or deformed or something, and the physical isn't all there is. So there's an interior reality that can be quite beautiful and that we should be attracted to also. But what the left educates for today is a perverse attraction to things that are ugly, to things that are discordant, to things that are contrary to reason, to things that are absurd. That's what they educate for. And don't forget, we bring up Aristotle, at least 3 times a week on this show, but Aristotle has a lot to say about education, and he points out that education begins not just by stuffing facts into your head, but by cultivating tastes. That's why the left goes into the elementary schools and tries to cultivate not even strong leftist ideology, but just tries to cultivate disordered desires and appetites. That's why it's putting all into kindergartens, which we'll get to in just a moment. So it really is at first a matter of taste. This is why the left feels so threatened by like pretty women. Now, it opens up on the bit about Sydney Sweeney's cleavage. Of course, the attraction to beautiful things needs to be circumscribed by morality and ethics, and we don't want to become lecherous. We don't want to become vain or lustful or anything like that. That's also going to redound to the benefit of the left. But the basic attraction to beautiful things, that is the key political flame for conservatism. If you have just in your gut a desire to preserve beautiful things rather than to destroy beautiful things in pursuit of ugliness, as the left has, you are much more likely to be a conservative. That's why they got to snuff that out. And when they find out that there's even one young man in America who is not himself or on all sorts of, when they find out there's one young man in America who thinks that Sydney Sweeney is hot, they got to snuff that out. That is really bad. That's really terrible. Because it's really not about Sydney Sweeney or the cleavage or anything like that. It is about a much deeper left-wing aversion to beauty, because beauty leads us to the other transcendentals, goodness and truth, and the libs can't have that. The 2024 vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz is coming to DailyWire Plus tomorrow night. But these debates are better with friends, especially friends who can spot every lie and false promise. That is why we're doing a special backstage with pre-show analysis from Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Andrew Klavan, Jeremy Boring, and yours truly. And you can stick around for a post-debate breakdown with insights you will not hear anywhere else. The VP debate is tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on DailyWire Plus. My favorite comment yesterday, or on Friday, I suppose, is from Crizzo9505, who says, in other words, we lost another election already. No. It's my favorite comment because a lot of conservatives think this way, but I don't like the sentiment. No. This is, I suppose, in response to all these non-citizens being registered to vote. No, we have not lost the election already. That is doomer, black pill, loser behavior. That is the kind of, if you have that attitude, get out of my team. I don't want you on my team if you have that kind of attitude. That is the attitude that the libs want to cultivate. We know that the libs don't think they have the election in the bag. You know why we know that? Because they're spending a ton of money on TV ads, because they're justifying multiple assassination attempts against Trump, because they're trying to lock him up in prison, because they're trying to register non-citizens to vote, because they're doing everything they can to get any additional advantage in the election, which means they don't think they have it in the bag. The left has a lot of political power. The left controls basically every institution in the country. The levers of government are broadly rigged for the left. That's all true. But these people are not omnipotent. And you doomer black pill people who say it's all for naught drive me up a wall, because you make the left into God or something like that. The left is not God, okay? Enough of that. No doomerism in early October, okay? Is it October yet? No, it's almost October, okay? We got like a little over a month left. Cut it out. Stop discouraging people. Good grief. Now, there's a lot more going on in the presidential election. We'll get to that tomorrow. There's plenty of time to talk about that. I have to talk about something in schools right now. We found this, our team here at the Daily Wire got a tip about this. In Kent, Ohio, there is a school that has created a list of banned books and then instructed 14-year-olds to read them. So they have this big sign up there, read banned books, which of course, if you are literate or in any way reasonable, you would notice if a public institution is encouraging you to read a book, it is not a banned book, obviously. But it says, read banned books, check out a banned book today. Caution, caution, caution. So we looked into what these books are, just to give you a sense. One of the books is This Book is Gay. It's written by this guy, James Juno Dawson. He's a man who says that he's a woman. It targets adolescents, and it contains extremely instructions. He writes about what he calls girl-on-girl. He tells teenage girls that they might like to have, quote, stuff poked up their derrieres. He writes about the bodies of women. This is to very young girls. He instructs girls as young as 14 to do, I'm not even going to read it on the air because I have a nice show and I don't want it to be polluted with this guy's disgusting. But he instructs them to do unnatural things. He instructs little boys to do unnatural in disgusting language. We reached out to the school for comment. You're going to be shocked to hear we got a little bit of the runaround. They sent us around. No, you got to call this person. No, you got to call that person. Eventually, we're referred to the superintendent, Tom Larkin. I haven't gotten a response back yet. This is in a Trump voting county. This is in a GOP state congressional district. This is not San Francisco. This is not New York City. This is not Gomorrah by the Sea, Los Angeles. This is Trump country. This is Ohio, okay? What they call banned books are obviously not banned books. Many Republicans are arguing we should not ban books. We hate now, but we necessarily do ban books all the time. There's always, there are only so many weeks in a semester. There are only so many books you can actually read in school. There are choices that have to be made with finite resources. No one thinks, as far as I know, no one thinks we should put the anarchist cookbook teaching kids how to make bombs in elementary schools. Maybe that's the next one the left is going to push. But we obviously have to circumscribe certain things. The question is not, are we going to ban books or not ban books? The question is, what books are we going to have in schools? In the 50s, you could teach the Bible in schools. You couldn't teach in elementary schools. Today, you basically have to teach in the elementary schools, but you're not allowed to teach the Bible in any school. Seems to me we had it better in the 50s. Call me crazy, call me old-fashioned. I'm not the only person who thinks this, though. We have the chief of Oklahoma schools on the show to discuss his plan, which he just announced, to put a Bible in every Oklahoma school. Here's just a little clip of that announcement.
The first thing I want to talk about is a request that we're going to be making in this budget, and it will be a request for $3 million to provide Bibles to the Oklahoma classrooms. We have talked about ensuring that our history courses include the role the Bible played throughout American history. We've talked about the efforts of left-wing groups and the teachers' unions to drive the Bible out of school. I believe it's important for historical context for our kids to understand the role the Bible played. And so that $3 million ask is provided in the budget in front of you. That would be in conjunction with the $3 million that we're putting forth currently to provide Bibles in the classroom. So this would give us the ability to utilize $6 million in less than 2 years to ensure that the Bible hasn't been driven out of Oklahoma classrooms, and would be a significant step for the state of Oklahoma to ensure that we're not allowing the left to censor American history.
The man behind that very excellent plan joins the show now, Ryan Walters. Ryan, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on, Michael.
You have done something that would have been not only uncontroversial, unobjectionable, just, 5-6 decades ago. You're doing something that would have been common sense. People would have scratched their heads at your plan for the schools because it's so obvious. Why are you even announcing this? Today, however, the left is losing its mind over your plan. What motivated you to do it?
Well, what we've seen in our schools since the 1960s, you saw the United States Supreme Court have all these rulings against prayer and the Bible in schools. And look at what's happened to society since then. What's happened to society when we started telling kids that the only influences in American history were secular, that the Bible and the Christian faith and the Judeo-Christian values of so many in this country didn't play a role. Well, that's not what the individuals in our history said. They quoted the Bible extensively. They talked about it throughout all of their actions that were significant. And so when you look at our history classes and you look at our schoolrooms, you see the Bible that has been removed forcibly. They threaten lawsuits for any teacher that quotes the Bible, uses a Bible verse, even when it's just a quote from someone throughout our history. And then, as you pointed out earlier in your show, on the other hand, in our state, we had the teachers union forcing books like Flamer and Genderqueer in. So in their mind, inclusivity means for first graders, but no historical context of the Bible. I mean, it's absurd. We're not going to put up with it. Our young people need to understand the role that the Bible played in American history, and every student in Oklahoma is going to understand that.
So let me just ask what the left is promoting. all over the country right now. Are you in Oklahoma now forcing school children in public taxpayer-funded schools to be Christian? They've got to practice the Christian religion. You theocrats in Oklahoma, is that what you're doing?
Absolutely not. Look, we're not pushing a religion on kids. We're not forcing a religion on kids. What we're doing is teaching history. And here's the reality. How do you teach the history of America? Let's just use a few examples. Why did the Pilgrims come to America? Good luck explaining that without mentioning their faith, without mentioning the Bible. You look at every president extensively quoted Bible verses. I'm going to give you one more recent example. In our schools, we require the school districts to talk about Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. An incredible letter, right? Remember, he's in a jail. He's been in prison. He has people out criticizing him very vocally. How can you justify breaking the law if you're some moral upstanding citizen, right? And he says, well, listen, I'm a Christian. He quotes in his letter from a Birmingham jail the examples of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and says, listen, I'm a Christian. I follow biblical examples, which tell me sometimes I don't have to obey the law if it doesn't coincide with God's law. How do you explain Martin Luther King's position if you take out the Bible and his Christian faith? It's absurd. It's lying to kids. It's academic malpractice to pretend like faith didn't have a major role in American history.
I think this is the key, really. There are deeper educational points about how education can never be neutral. This was, I think, a trick the left played on us. They pretended that atheism and radical leftism is somehow neutral. You know, anything that was previously taught or believed in our country or civilization, that was somehow partisan and extreme and sectarian. But this radical leftism that now, you know, pretends that little boys can be little girls and encourages them to go on puberty blockers, that's somehow neutral and scientific and beyond these philosophical and theological debates. That's obviously absurd. There's no such thing as neutrality. Education has to teach something. The point of education is to seek and inculcate the truth, and the truth is exclusive. It excludes things like falsehood and that which contradicts the truth. But put all of that aside. Put aside even the fact that education necessarily has a moral component. It is to cultivate good habits that allow one even to perceive and attain the truth. Put even that aside for a second. You know, you're not going to do very well in education if you're shooting up, you know, sleeping in until 12 noon. Put all that aside. It's a long preface. How can you be an educated person without knowing the Bible? You go into a museum. How do you understand the paintings on the wall from like any historical period if you don't understand the Bible? How do you read the speeches of Abraham Lincoln, which are basically imitations of the King James Bible? How do you know anything? I mean, even if you're an atheist, Ryan, it would seem to me you have to admit the Bible is the most significant book ever written.
Look, that's exactly right. And here's the reality is, look, the left can be offended by it. They cannot agree with it. They cannot like it. But they can't rewrite our history. And that's the reality. And I pose this question to some of our critics on the left. So how do you determine what books are in schools in a literature class if the basis is, well, what was being read by the population, what influenced society? Okay. Well, how is the Bible not in that discussion? I mean, if the Bible, the most read book in American history, the most cited book in American history, isn't included in the context of American literature to understand society, I mean, it's really a joke. And this is, to your point, what the left has pulled over on our education institutions. They have pretended like this is neutral, that excluding and removing and censoring the role faith played in American history is somehow a neutral position. And I laid it out in our meeting last week. Listen, that's a choice. You know, not taking action and allowing the left to drive this out of our schools is a choice. You are choosing to lie to our kids that the people who had such an influence in this country, their faith didn't play a role, when those people said it did play a role, when those individuals like John Adams said morality is essential for this republic to work moving forward. These are quotations. These are what they said in their time, what influenced them and what they thought was important in this nation's history. And again, regardless of whether you're an atheist or whether you're another religion, that doesn't matter. This is our history. You have to understand our history in order for us to make proper decisions moving forward as a country.
Of course. I'm now even thinking, how do you make sense of the American Revolution, which derives, one of the earliest flags was an appeal to heaven. Justice Alito got in trouble for flying this classic American flag at his home. An appeal to heaven, what does that come from? It comes from a line from John Locke's Second Treatise of Government. The appeal to heaven suggests that one can appeal even above the head of a king to heaven. How do you make sense of that if you don't have some sense of the Bible? How do you make sense of the Civil War? We think of the battle hymn of the Republic. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is stamping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. How do you, if you have no biblical literacy, how do you make sense of that? To your point, the civil rights movement is so frequently grounded in the Bible, in religion. It's so obvious to me that the consequence of taking God out of schools is not that students are freer thinkers or somehow more open-minded. I suppose it's that they're so open-minded, their brains have fallen out and they don't actually really know anything anymore. So there's obviously going to be a ton of pushback. I'm already over time, but what you're doing is just so good and important, and it's frankly a scandal that every other Republican in your position in the country is not also doing this. It's just so obvious and common sense. So thank you for having the courage to do it. When the legal challenges come, what are the odds that you prevail? What are the odds that we actually see Bibles back in schools in Oklahoma and around the country?
Oh, look, I'm incredibly confident legally because here's the reality, too. President Trump has actually put originalists on the court, so we can actually have a better understanding. They're not just going to pull a decision out of thin air on a 1960s decision. They're going to go back and look at the Constitution. And frankly, they're going to look at American history. And even the New York Times, Michael, quote, fact-checked me, right, and said, well, he technically is right. Until the 1960s, a Bible would have been in every classroom. So when you even have the New York Times admitting that historically, until magically Supreme Court justices knew better than everyone else in the 1960s, the founders themselves, individuals throughout our history, didn't see an issue with it, didn't see any kind of legal problem. Until then, I feel very confident about our chances in the courts moving forward.
That is great news. Ryan Walters, thank you for what you're doing. I know that, we have some Republican lawmakers and people in positions in government who listen to the show. Follow suit, guys. Do what Ryan is doing. This is obvious. It's obviously the right thing to do. It requires guts and clarity. But, if you don't have that, what are you doing in politics? Ryan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. The Membrum Segmentum is coming up. We have so much more to get to. It is Music Monday. Do not go anywhere. Other than to dailywire.com, use code Knowles at checkout. Get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you in the Membrum Segmentum.
The stage is set. The stakes are sky high. Senator Vance, Governor Walz, face off. But who will land the knockout punch? Don't watch the debate alone. Experience it with the most trusted names in conservative media. DailyWire Backstage brings you unfiltered commentary, biting wit, and expert analysis you won't get anywhere else. Join Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Clavin, and Jeremy Boring for a debate night you'll never forget. Daily Wire Backstage, tomorrow night, 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central, only on Daily Wire Plus.